Right, back with you, and thanks for staying on. A group of diverse South African cultural communities has formally established the Cultural Communities Network. It's meant to ensure a peaceful and prosperous future for the children of all cultural communities in the country. For more on this, we're joined now in studio by Afriforum's Barend Ace. While on video link, we have a leader of the Barolong Seleka nation, Kgosi, Gaboilelwe, Moroka, as well as Martinez Fredericks, who is the leader of AMA. We appreciate you and thank you very much for coming on this afternoon. Well, let's begin with you, Barend, here in the studio. The organization came about at least around August or so, around the 4th of August, the intention being to form a structure that is going to have input into a document that will be taken to the national dialogue. Tell us how things have progressed since then.
So the leaders, of course, after those first engagements, agreed that it should extend beyond the national dialogue, and that actually it's long overdue for the leaders of different cultural communities to find a forum where they can engage, find common ground and find collaboration. And this past Wednesday, we had a gathering of the leaders from the diverse cultural communities, and this network of cultural communities was formalized by the adoption of a rules of order, basically a rules of order that explains how a meeting of these various cultural communities will be conducted, and in other words, that is how the network was formalized.
So I looked a little bit on the website. I mean, in your own list of the 38 delegates that you put there, it's not all cultural groups.
No, of course not.
Yeah,
this
so
is a very humble start. No, this is of course a very humble start, but it needs to start
what's
somewhere.
the criteria of those that are part currently?
So of course these were leaders that found each other along the way, and so we serve as the small nucleus that started the conversation and that had this meeting to say, let's just put a peg in the ground for progress going forward. But of course, any, maybe you can say, structure, organization that represents cultural community interests are welcome to join, and of course we invite all of them to join. But of course, this is a very humble start, considering that we've had about 26 different cultural communities present.
Right. Kgosi, welcome to the conversation. What made you decide to be a part of this network?
Well, thank you, Thabo, and greetings to you and the viewers at home. Thabo, I think it goes without question. I think it's a logical thing to do. No cultural community can be in existence in isolation. And I think part of the problems or challenges we face need us to come together as leaders from different cultural communities in our diversity to come, and start the conversations. In fact, if we read history, we can see that our forefathers did that. They would have platforms where they would come together to discuss issues of importance and see how they shape the future forward. So essentially, I don't think it was something that one has to even think about, because it is in the best interest of not only the nation that I lead, but all cultural communities within the country.
What one would ask, I mean, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs is currently leading a process of, I suppose, refining what they call the Traditional Leaders and Khoisan Act, following the Concord judgment, giving them until 2027 to fix that process. Why not join that particular process that has status in the constitution and the legal framework of the country and have input there?
Thabo, let me make an example for you. I am the Deputy Chairperson of the Free State House of Traditional Leaders, Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, and therefore part of the structure. I'm also the Chairperson of Contralesa, but that does not mean you cannot have conversations. I don't think we need to look for issues where there are not issues, or create certain narrative where there are no narratives. we can have open conversations. There's nothing wrong with engaging with one another outside the formal structures of government. That is a healthy thing to do. And if we can stop as a country, I think we have many issues, challenges. The country is burning. And maybe our focus should be there in saying, how do we move forward? How do we have different conversations that build, that bring us together? It's about that. Obviously, I am part of government. I support government. It is who we are. Our work is to complement the work of government. But that does not mean we cannot have different engagements.
Yeah. Talk about the leadership and the governance of this network. How is it governed? How do you then get recognized within the structures and the frameworks of government?
So I think the most important thing about this network is it is a network. So when we met Wednesday, we also told each other it's really very important to understand that this is not an organization. This is different. We are a meeting or a network of different cultural communities. That is the reality. So these different cultural communities get the opportunity to meet, to find common ground and to find ways to collaborate. So in other words, you do not have something like a permanent chairpersonship or a permanent secretary, simply because it is a meeting that gathers or a network. We all, of course, we have our unique interests, but then we all know that there are a lot of interests that we share. So if you say what will carry it forward, so the way that the network will work forward is, so for example, if there's an area that is identified where we can collaborate and where there's common ground, a specific committee will be appointed to handle that something specifically. Say, for example, if mother language education is identified, there will be a very specific committee handling mother language education, but all decisions taken will always go back to this meeting. Another very important thing is that none of the communities present will ever be bounded by a decision they do not agree to. Okay. And this is what makes it unique. It's really a round table where different cultural communities sit and where we find common ground. And when we, of course, it's very easy to focus on differences. This is not about focusing on differences. It's about focusing on common ground, but nobody can be forced into something that they do not agree with. And then the running, or let's say, of course, if you've got something like this, logically you need to keep proper records, and of course somebody needs to organize a next meeting, and for that we've got committees. So we've got a committee for correspondence and record, and we've got a committee responsible for setting up the next meeting. So that's basically the way that it works. The chairpersonship and the secretary of the meeting ceases after the adoption of the minutes of the last meeting that you had.
Okay. Now, I'm saying that in light of the fact that, I mean, there are quite critical issues that you've raised in your first meeting that would require input into legislation, would require changes, maybe in some instances, into legislation and so on and so forth. So it's not something that you as a network would be able to achieve without having a process of bringing that input into the framework of South Africa. So what is the thinking?
Maybe let me just say, it's not about bringing something into South Africa. This is just about recognizing the reality of South Africa. And let's just say, there's one reality that are not very often spoken about. And this is that, broadly speaking, you've got different frames of reference in the country. So you might find people with a frame of reference that puts the individual in the center. So the way that they view the world and the way that they view solutions puts the individual at the center. Then you've got a group of people that views the world and views solutions, putting the state in the center. And then you've got a third group. And this third group simply views the world and views solutions from the lens of cultural identity and cultural communities. So of course, the only thing that this network does is, of course, it simply recognizes a South African reality. Now, it's really important to understand that you can try to change things that are not within your means or within your power, and that will, of course, be really frustrating. So the best way to approach is to say, but what are the things that are within our power to change? So, of course, this is one of the key points here. So this is not some kind of, let's call it an ideological gathering talking about philosophy. It's really about what are the grassroots things that we can change and what are the grassroots things we can collaborate on. And of course, if you gather the cultural communities in the country, and of course, if you gain momentum and you get a lot of cultural communities to join, of course, you will have a substantial means to act. And sometimes the legal framework actually exists. You just don't see action. And let me just now put a very contentious issue, but just something very small on the table. The reality is that many cultural communities, termed by government as traditional communities, they've got land, yet they don't own it.
Yeah.
Government still says government is the custodian of this land. Yet if you look at legislation, existing legislation, there's legal mechanisms available for government to transfer the land to the communities. Yet it's not happening. So this is the kind of thing...
So you're saying the reason why that would not be happening is because there would not have been a collaborative effort from those traditional or cultural communities to challenge that view, or at least to test it in law if they can do so?
Well, why it was not done, I cannot explain. But what I do know is we know that there's a mechanism available. Of course, it's very difficult if you are one community that are striving to achieve something, also because means are limited, to get something, and let's call it to get something significant like that done. It's very different if across a broad range of cultural communities they say, but we agree that there is something that needs to happen, and we can all understand the legislation, there is a possibility. Let's collaborate on getting this done. Of course, it puts it at a different kind of a level.
But you know that there would be other communities or other world views that would be opposed.
Yes, of course. And this is the beauty of this network, and this is the beauty of this approach that we are following, is it's voluntary. If you join and you agree, if you want to come to a table where we try to find common ground, you are welcome. If you disagree, of course you can still disagree, but of course that should not deter us from trying to speak to each other, even having the difficult conversations and trying to find common ground, specifically if we put ourselves a bit in the background and say this is about the future of our children.
Kgosi, I mean, one of the things that I see here is as part of the agreement coming out of the first meeting, or at least the draft document, is the promotion and recognition, meaningful recognition of all cultural communities, specifically the Khoisan, the Afrikaner, and of course, others. Are there things that when you look at our current framework that you still feel they need further entrenchment as far as recognition is concerned?
Thabo, of course, that goes without saying, that goes without question. It is work in progress, I believe. We're still really far behind when we question, in terms of the Constitution, how Chapter 12 of the Constitution that speaks to traditional leaders does not really say much, and therefore disadvantages the institution of traditional leadership, and that would have to be reviewed. But we also have what we call the handbook, for instance, that needs to be also reviewed, and that's been on the table for years. I make an example that some of our parents have been in the system since the dawn of democracy, and yet we're still discussing the same things that our parents were discussing. So that means we don't have the rapid response that we need and the improvement that we need for the sector to thrive, especially the dignity of the sector, because traditional royal leadership is the essence of who we are, our identity as Africans. So yes, definitely there's still a lot of work to be done.
So as Barend say, I mean, are you saying when you talk of Section 12, it's particularly in the role and responsibilities of traditional leadership, maybe even to the extent of what they have to say about the land in which they occupy? Are those things that you're saying still need further and deeper recognition and maybe clarity?
Most certainly, most certainly. Traditional authorities are now termed traditional councils, and therefore the authority of the institution has basically been taken away. And that puts us in a very compromised position as the institution of traditional leadership.
All right, I appreciate you both. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We'll leave it there. Barend and the Kgosi for the Barolong Seleka nation, Kgosi wa Gaboilelwe Moro. We appreciate your time. Right, what's making news next here on the Newsfeed PM? Do stay with us.